Okay, so let's pick up. I've just discovered that the Thomas link is taking forever to load, so um, you might try that instead. But let me also say I just did a search in the previous video where I looked up women in the military and or it was sexual assault in the military. And so please don't use that article if you are one of the people who are doing women in the military, and that's a lot of you. As I did it, I was thinking, well, it's not fair to everybody else who's doing other topics. So please do not use that article about sexual assault in the military if your topic is women in the military. Pick something else from that list. Okay, so that makes it fairer for everybody. So that is one way to get information, but another way to get information about legislation is to look at what used to be called Thomas, and it's now the name is also Congress.gov. So if you go to databases, you click on the letter C, you go down, and you click on Congress.gov, right? And the idea here is, I really think it's important for everybody to be aware of this page because this is the official page of the United States Congress. Um, beyond Hunter, beyond schoolwork, this is something that you can utilize the rest of your life to look up who's representative in Congress, whether their voting records. If you have a particular piece of information, legislation you're interested in, or a topic, it's really a great way to look at what's going on, and you can even watch things in session. So it's a really great site. It's simply congress.gov. But for our purposes, for the assignment, this is where you could also go to look up legislation related to your topic. So I'm going to pick something that no one is going to be doing in terms of World War II, obviously World War I. I'm going to put in coronavirus again. Coronavirus. And financial aid. Okay, so again, Boolean, capital and coronavirus. I could also put COVID, but I'll just leave it at that. And then I put and financial aid in quotes, and I'll click on search. So the idea here is that I'm looking for legislation relating to coronavirus. And so the first thing you can see as you go down, there are 42 pieces of legislation, which is not surprising. And they're all basically from this Congress from this year, which also makes sense because it only started this year, right? And so the HR, you can see like number one is HR 748. HR stands for House of Representatives. Number four is S 3489. S obviously would stand for the Senate. So that's where the bill is coming from. So we can take a look through these. Maybe we can take a look at. Now, it's interesting. I was thinking about college students, and here's one: 6275, number three, supporting students in response to the Coronavirus Act. Okay, so that's something that relates to what we're talking about. So I'm going to click on the link here. And this might be of interest to a lot of you in the class. So here is a bill. The latest action is from March 13th. So this went out in the House right after the shutdown. And so as you're scrolling down here, you can look at the text. This is what you want to click on when you're doing the assignment. So you want to read the bill. You can skim parts of it because a lot of this is just repetitive, and this is just this one particular bill. But basically, read it over and get a general idea about what the bill is about. What's the idea behind it? Why is it being proposed? And then you can go through and take a look at it. There's also the summary, which you can look at there, which goes over it in brief. I'm actually curious myself. This is from March 13th. What has happened since then? You can look at the actions. It was introduced in the House on March 13th, and nothing has been done with it, sadly. There have been no amendments to it. You can look at here. So the sponsor is the member of Congress who introduced it. The sponsor you can see is Representative Scott Robert C. Bobby. I guess Bobby Scott from Virginia. And these are the co-sponsors. So these are other members of Congress who have also supported this proposal, and they are from all around the country. And then you can see which committee it's looking at. So where did it go? Which committee is looking this over? And it went to House Education and Labor, which makes sense. And then you can look at related bills. Okay, so there's all this information you can take a look at. So there's this one's from the Senate. This one's also from March 12th. So again, it doesn't look at anything that's been done with them, surprisingly, since they were proposed. And so this one's basically the Senate's answer to the other one. So anyways, in this sense that you would cite it, you would read it over and get a general idea about what the bill is about. You don't necessarily have to worry about who sponsored it, but I just want you, in terms of being a citizen, a voter, just to understand how you can get this information, what it looks like, and even just getting an idea. I mean, if there's once in your life that you actually read a bill of Congress, which this might be the only time you ever do that, it's just a good civic thing to go through, right? Just read it, realize that it's not magic, it's not something that's hard to understand. It's usually pretty straightforward, but this is how the government works, and this is how bills are passed and laws are passed. So you can take a look at this just to get background in that process. Okay, now, so that is your legislative. You can either go to CQ or you can go to congress.gov. The next thing I want to talk about is the idea of you have to include an interview. So you have to include an interview with someone who is related to your topic in an obvious way. If you're doing women and in the military who are pilots, in a modern equivalent to World War II, obviously you'd find an interview with a female pilot in the military. So that would be an obvious thing you'd want to take a look at. So that's the general idea here. Now you can find it. You could find the interview online. It might be an interview on YouTube that was on CNN or MSNBC or Fox or whatever. That's fine. But what I recommend you do to make your life a little easier is use a database called Opposing Viewpoints. So I'm going to click on Databases. I'm going to go to the letter O, and then I'm going to pick Opposing Viewpoints. And you'll see why I'm doing this. Opposing Viewpoints is unique in a lot of ways, but for our purposes, it includes interviews. So this is why I'm mentioning it now. So I've been talking about students and coronavirus. Let's kind of stick with that. I'll pick schools and coronavirus. And so here are the sources for that. Now, the academic journal articles are pretty standard. The viewpoints and all that are interesting. We have images and so on and so forth. But what I would do is scroll down to the audio. So the audio is, they're primarily, I wouldn't say exclusively, but probably from my experience, 90% of them come from NPR shows. So you can see the first one is from All Things Considered. There's one from Morning Edition. There's quite a few from Morning Edition, All Things Considered, back and forth. Weekend Edition Sunday. But you could listen to one of these, and because it's on the radio, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be an interview with someone. So it's the host of the radio show talking to some expert about a topic. And what's nice is that you can actually listen to the interview, and there's also a transcript. So you can play the audio, you can read it here, whatever works better for you. But again, if you're kind of burned out and you can't read anything more, you could just play the audio. This one's pretty short and sweet. So this one is a very short interview. Might not be the one that I picked. But again, looks like just a light story about Alabama schools having some kind of graduation recognition just by coronavirus. But again, that's a pretty short one. Here's another example here. Okay, so this is the idea, and you can see it's an interview. The host is Steve Inskeep, and he is interviewing Alicia Morris, and he goes back and forth, Inskeep Morris, Inskeep Morris. So again, there's your interview, right? It's that straightforward. So you can use this. If you don't find anything you like in opposing viewpoints, you can utilize, like I said, YouTube or another place where there are interviews. But it has to be an interview, right? It has to be somebody answering questions. Now, the last thing I want to go over. I want you to look at journals from the left and the right. You have to find one article from a source on the left, one article from a source on the right. It has to be from the list that I put on the assignment sheet. So if you go back and you look at the final annotated bibliography assignment sheet, I list the sources you have to pull from. All right. So now let's say you want to look at something on the left. And I list Mother Jones and the New Yorker and several sources. So what you can do is to find the journal to look within, click on journal. Okay, it's really simple. When you go to the library page, click on journals, and then just type in the name of the journal. So I'll put in Mother Jones, which is one of the ones that leans to the left. And I'll just pick the first one. This is Academic Search Complete, which you're already familiar with. I've shown it to you, so you just click on this. And when you do it this way, it's basically saying, okay, we're going to set you up, and we've got the journal set up for you. And since you don't have a specific issue, it's not like you're looking for the July 2015 issue. You're looking for the larger subject. If you click on where it says search within this publication, right? So at the very top, you can see J.N. Mother Jones. So it's going to automatically search within this particular journal. And then I'll do the coronavirus idea. All right. So let's leave it at that. I'll keep it broad. So I'm looking at all the articles in Mother Jones about coronavirus, and we've got 21 to choose from. Any of these, but the idea is, I'm gonna pull up this one. You pull up the article, you'll read it, and when you're reading it, I specifically picked sources that are very clear in their politics. So as you're reading it, I want you to try to identify, why does it seem to be coming from the left? Why does it seem to be a liberal standpoint about the pandemic as opposed to a conservative? And I'll explain more about how to do that in 2 weeks. But that's what I want you to be doing, not just reading it, but also trying to determine, can you see the bias? And interesting, a lot of the time, it's not clear that there even is a bias, which is also part of my point. A lot of times, you have an article that's supposed to be from a really right-wing source, and you realize that a lot of times it's basically saying something very similar to the left wing. Okay, so it's not as stark as you might think. Okay, so those are the sources. That's how you find them. And as I say in the slides, I would suggest you start now. It's not a long paper that you need to write as you experience with the midterm, but finding the sources is where the labor is. And if you do it a little bit at a time rather than leaving it to the last minute, you'd be much better off. All right. Okay, so next week we'll talk about public library resources. And until then, I will see you then.